Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and welcome to this edition of Spiritual Infinity. And as you know, my name is Zenzi Sewa, and I'm speaking from London. And my guest today is John Mark Wilson, who is a podcaster himself, and he's the podcaster of Beaten Zone. He's the Beaten Zone podcast, and that is about um, people in the military who have gone through combat, and he himself was one, and what they feel, and how they're feeling, and what they've gone through, and how they're dealing with it. And it's exactly an ideal thing, because it's people who have been in combat, they're holding in so much, and we don't know what they're going through. But men in general are holding in things simply because society says they're men and they've got to be macho, and they don't know how sometimes to talk about their feelings, let their anxieties out, reach out to people, because men are supposed to be men. They're not supposed to be crying and wimpy. That's wrong. Men are human beings with feelings, and like us women, they need to also talk about their feelings, and they sometimes need help with it. And we need to understand that. And I'm brought about this because, unfortunately, the men's suicide rate is increasing. And we need to see how we can stop that, how men can just be human beings and speak about their feelings and speak about their anxieties. If something's going on in the workplace, if they've come from combat, they need to speak about it, and we need to listen, and we need to see how we can help them. So as much as they're macho, they're human. So without much ado, let me introduce you to John Mark Wilson, who is in Washington, DC. They're 5 hours behind us. I'm in London, gone 1 o'clock. 9 minutes past 1, and he's 9 minutes past 8 in the morning. So, John Mark, thank you so much for coming on and speaking at that time. How are you?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the warm intro, and I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful day here, beautiful morning, and I look forward to a chat on something that I feel is very important, and I'm extremely excited. You hit on all the key themes there in the beginning, and so I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Thank you so much. So I'm not going to do any more talking. You might see me put my hand up because I want to ask a question. And as my viewers know, I don't do preambling or pre-talking. So it's simply you talk just one-to-one. I listen and I ask just as a bystander. So John, please tell us how you started, what happened to you in your life and your journey, bringing you to what you're doing today.
Yes, ma'am. Well, my life, my journey is very similar to many young boys that grew up in the southern part of the United States, in rural areas. You kind of grow up I was raised by a very loving middle class family. I had pretty much every opportunity available to me to be successful, to be loved. I had a wonderful childhood. I can't point back to a single thing about my childhood that would ever cause me to do anything bad. I was given every advantage that I could possibly have that would equip me for life. One of the things that was hammered into me at a young age was the importance of service. And like many young men, we were grandsons of the World War II generation, right? And so my grandfathers both served in World War II and in the Korean War. Before then, I had ancestors and relatives that served. So service in the military seemed to be the logical fit. I was in Boy Scouts, right? I played sports. That was kind of the course that I was on. I was raised in the church. Typical, the stereotypical Southern white male, lifestyle of living down south in the day. My mother in particular put a lot of emphasis on education. She thought that getting a college degree was important, and really pushed my sister and I to get an education. My journey led me to West Point, which is basically the United States' version of Sandhurst, right? And so I received my degree from there, and I became an officer in the United States Army. So, things, it was a very traditional kind of thing. This is the course I kind of always thought I was going to be on. And, then 9/11 happened. It happened 4 years into my military career. I was actually contemplating, retire or leaving the Army and going into the civilian life. But when that day happened, not to be overly dramatic here, there aren't dramatic arcs to life. You just kind of drift in and out of things. But there was in the back of my head, the stories of my grandfather doing their bit, right? And the whole idea at that point of getting out and going in the civilian world and serving in a different capacity just didn't seem to be the right thing. And so I decided to stay in. And that led to about, well, as we all know now, the world's, the United States' longest, it's probably Britain's too, longest military campaign, over 20 years of operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, I, while I was in those operations, I'm not your traditional, I'm not your shoot 'em up, bang 'em up kind of veteran. I never claimed that. There are veterans out there who, oh, by the way, represent a very small portion of the overall military, who saw a lot of very intensive combat. But because I was a leader and because I served in a lot of different high output kind of positions, and I was deployed, I deployed 5 times. So that was almost 6 years kind of away from my family and just in some very high stress situations. I found myself in a situation where I was always working. I was always working on important things. I was expected to produce. And while I was in that service period, I developed a taste and a love for alcohol. And I am a recovered alcoholic. I haven't had a touch of alcohol now in almost 10 years. And but during that period of time of my life, alcohol became I guess I could say, an outlet for dealing with stress, for dealing with complexity, which is important, and just processing the world around me. And it became a way that I could kind of escape. There's really no, when you're in recovery, they always try to get you to trace everything back to your childhood, try to find reasons to blame your parents, try to find reasons to blame the kid who bullied you. It was nothing like that for me. I literally drifted into it. And what I found was, man, if I can just make it through the day and produce and be very functional and do my job, and I can get home and I can start throwing back some Jack Daniels or some Wild Turkey or, whatever the drink of choice was that night, I can find an escape. And that's what it really became. And it came to a head when I had my medical exam, when I became a colonel. I had a medical exam and my doctor told me to come in after the blood test. And I was like, that's never a good thing. I was thinking, something very serious. And he asked me straight up, he said, "Hey, I have a question for you. How much do you drink a day?" And I do what a lot of alcoholics do. It's like, "Oh, I have a couple." He said, "Could you be a little bit more
specific?"
And I was like, I'll probably have a couple of beers and maybe I'll have a nightcap. And he said, "Okay, that's a lie. All right. So I want you to tell me everything." And so I told him, and he finally drug the truth out of me. And I was admitted into the Army's kind of institutional alcoholic program.
Yep. Let me stop you there. Now, you're in the Army. This happened. Where were you actually? Were you abroad serving in another country?
Mm-hmm. No, I was not abroad. You're not allowed to consume alcohol while you're on operations abroad. And I actually was very true to that. I never once broke the rules and had a beer or a liquor while I was in service. However, I was in the United States at a senior leaders course, so it was a very high profile course for senior leaders, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
so it's kind of embarrassing when you're when you're spotted for being having a substance abuse problem in that context, because you're at this course now where you're taking your career to the next level, right?
Yeah.
And now you're having to enter this program. um yeah, so I entered the program, I stopped drinking, but as you know, just turning off the spigot isn't enough. There's a whole bunch of rewiring you have, not rewiring, but a reflection that you have to do.
Mhm.
Well, the Army retained me. They didn't kick me out in the street, which I think is a credit to the institution in that regard. Um, and so I went on to my next assignment, and it just so happened that the assignment that would entail a deployment back to Iraq. So I get into before you deploy, right? Before you deploy, you go in to have this conversation like with a medical team so they can rubber stamp that you're fit and that you're ready to go. So when I sat down with the nurse and the social worker, they noticed on my file that had been entered into the Army's like substance abuse program. Now I mentioned to them that I had successfully ticked all the boxes, I had completed all the requirements, so I'm fit. And they're like, "Well, you're not the one who gets to decide that. We're the one who gets to decide whether you're fit or not. You completed the course, but you've had this hiccup, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more." And I went to straight rage. The idea, I didn't throw over tables or do anything like that, but I got very angry, right? The whole idea that the very thing, my identity of always being available to serve, always being there, the idea that I would be held back and not be allowed to go forward with my soldiers was something I could not deal with. And I got very upset. I fought it tooth and nail. It was the greatest act of influence of my life because they actually capitulated, and against their advice, their medical advice, they let me go forward. And so I went forward. It was probably the worst deployment I've had in terms of execution, in terms of performance. I had a lot of problems. I won't go into too many details, but it effectively ended my career at that point. And upon reflection, looking back, the right thing to do would have been to listen to the medical professionals. This is the rest of my life. Here's a news flash for veterans. I can only speak for the U.S. Army. I can't speak for other countries. Here's a news flash. When you leave, when you retire, they give you a flag. In some cases, they give you a pension, and they give you a little retirement veterans pin, and they set you back out in the world. Okay. No one is going to give you extra credit for doing the sort of things that I did. The facts are, the logical, rational thing was I was not fit. I wasn't ready to go back into operations. I had a lot of things that I needed to tidy up. And just being in a scenario where alcohol wasn't available to me, because it wasn't in the Middle East, just because in my mind, I said, well, that's all I need. I just need to not be around booze. Then you get thrown in that very stressful, high output environment, and things just fell apart. And looking back, it was one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life. And it really opened up a bunch of, it effectively ended my career. I ended up, leaving earlier than I wanted. And it all came back to the whole idea that there's no way in God's green earth am I ever going to fail to show up. Am I going to fail to be there? I owe it to the people around me that I'm going to be there, and I'm going to give my best. It was a terrible decision. I was actually a vulnerability to the team. A liability to the team. Mm-hmm. And that was me. And we can talk more about the culture whenever you're ready about the military. But yeah. And so now I went to my final assignment. I worked in the White House for 2 years as a military person. And it was an interesting assignment, super stressful. And again, no real time for processing. You know,
Do you know, I'm sorry. When you made that comment, it was an interesting assignment, very stressful, no time. And I thought, interesting, very stressful. Okay.
yes, yep.
Things are about things.
And I've served with enough Brits to know that the term interesting doesn't mean the same thing over there that it means here in the States, right? I meant that in the British sense, not the American sense.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And so, you know, at that point, you know, I decided to get out of the Army. I was done. My course was done, and now I work in tech, and I'm fine. And things are tech is an interesting environment because it's certainly a high output, but there are a lot of cultural differences between the military and working in the egalitarian world of tech, right? And for me, it has been great because it's forced me to kind of slow down a little bit. One of the things that I really wanted to do was, how can I take like my story of recovery? How can I take my stories of life overseas on deployment and operations? And how can I turn that into something that's useful for other veterans? And so finally, it hit me, this idea of the Beaten Zone, which is really a storytelling project. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I need to stop you there because, as you said, you fought tooth and nail to go with your men, and it was the worst thing you could have done. And because there were a lot of things that you didn't realize that you needed to clean up. Now, you were with your men, then you went into the White House, and I think after the White House, that's when you realized you had enough, you had to leave. But between going into tech and that White House, how did you clean up? What were the steps you had to do to rewire yourself?
Great question. And full disclosure, I'm still trying to figure that out. You know, I think a lot of it is tech is high output environment, like the military. You know, you're on software release schedules. You have to get things done. You're expected to work long hours, right? But I think one of the key things that's missing is in tech, there's a lot of time for feedback loops. And these feedback loops are done in kind of a non-structured, kind of an egalitarian context, right? Where people are actually evaluating you for your performance and your output. The military is kind of different. The military has a shockingly low number of feedback loops, right? People will tell you if you're not doing your technical job well, if you're not performing but people also will tell you if you're not conforming to culture, right? The military has a very different structured, hierarchical kind of organizational design than tech. And there is a lot of pressure, particularly for people in leadership positions, to be institutionalists. You have to do what's right for the institution. You have to put yourself on a pedestal and achieve the highest standards. You have to set the example for the people that serve with you, right? And part of that is not showing weakness. Part of that is not showing vulnerability. It's a huge part of military life, and I'm not going to say that that's all bad because the military has a role. There is a function there. But what I have found was, looking back, I would have approached this concept of, quote, weakness very differently, because now I view weakness as a very different thing. I view weakness as a pathway to strength. I no longer view weakness as something that means that you're weak and it's a bad thing. And in a zero-sum world, weakness is a powerful tool to help you improve your life, to help you improve your performance. And in the military, unfortunately, and I don't like terms like macho and that kind of stuff, but I kind of will. There is this tension, right? That you need to be resolute and decisive, and you need to be strong. And that is kind of that kind of runs against this whole idea. Listen, I'll put it this way. There's a lot of pressure in the military to be Cary Grant or Idris Elba, the strong, silent type, right? There's a lot of pressure to be that. No one wants to have their commanding officer be perceived as kind of an emotional wreck, someone who's got real challenges. Ma'am, that's a real problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's a real problem. And so for me, I'm now in an environment where certainly the quality of my work and the volume of my contribution is important, but I no longer have to worry about that facade of strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That unlocked a lot of problems for me.
Can I just come in here? It's very interesting that you said it's about reviewing that word weakness, how we look at it and how we can use it to help somebody. Because what is weakness? I can't do A, and I find it difficult to do A, and I find it difficult to understand A. Oh, that's weakness, but I've got to do that. But if one can say, all right, you're finding it difficult, you can't do it, and it's rather to say, okay, let's look at A differently. Let's see why you're finding it difficult, the way you look at it, the way you perceive it, and then put it in a different way so that you can produce A and you can be A. And when that is done, because sometimes you just need that encouragement, you need that extra knowledge, that extra coaching to be able to do it. And once you do it and you say, right, I'm that strength, let's move on. And I think weakness should be looked in that. But I think in the military, if you can't do it, if you're finding it difficult, you can't say, and nobody's helping you. So that weakness remains there and it haunts you and it has that conflict within you and you don't get over it. So that's pressure building up.
That's very well said. That's very well said, ma'am. You know, I love it when people repeat back your words in a much more coherent and sharp way, because it helps me calcify my thinking, because I'm journaling about this stuff every day. I think you kind of inspired me to think of something, and it's the difference between functioning and processing, right? Yeah. In environments like the military, I think that I can only speak for my own personal and what I observed and the people who worked around me. I don't want to speak for the entire institution. Yeah. But I think what happens inside of these environments is that you start defaulting to functioning instead of processing. And here's the thing, it comes down to incentives. Functioning gets rewarded immediately, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're under pressure, if you're executing, if you're accomplishing the mission, guess what you're getting back? You're getting trust and reward. And you're reinforcing the idea that you're reliable and that people can count on you. I don't know what the hormone is in your body that makes you feel good. It's something. But when I was in the military and I was feeling that, man, I was on a high. Okay, there's no drug out there for me that made me feel better, because people can count on me. People respect you. But processing is different than functioning, right? And processing takes time. It requires safety. Like, I can go in and make myself vulnerable to this guy, and my career isn't going to be affected by it. My confidence isn't going to be affected by it. I know the military culture, people don't like squishy, terms like safe space, but that's what it is. It's a safe space where nothing is really being demanded of you. And to be honest, there aren't a lot of spaces like that in the military. They try. I'm not going to say the military just completely is an industrial machine. It kind of is. They do try, but the U.S. military is a very large institution. It has a lot of responsibilities. And so, here's the simple rule, okay? And this is, to me, what I've come to: deal with it later. Let's push this down the line. We'll deal with this later. And sadly for me, later sometimes meant coming home.
Yeah.
And the bottle was there. And, my wife, she is we've been married for 26 years now. And she has been my partner through this entire process. And she has seen me at my worst. She has seen me at my best. And a lot of that time dealing with it later means coming home and unloading my anxiety, not in a physical way.
No.
No one's going to lock me up. I don't do that kind of stuff. But I absolutely was difficult to live with. And she had to endure my struggles right alongside me. And she was the one that was caught in the beaten zone, as it were, of dealing with it later. Dealing with my dysfunction, dealing with my frustration. And the problem is there's no later. Okay. There's no later. And you can only manage your experiences for so long before alcohol and being grumpy and being angry and not let's just say that she carried a lot of weight for me through those 26 years. And later.
How did you, as you said, your career ended because of this turmoil within you? And when you left, how did you get over it? How did you handle it?
Man, it's a work in progress, ma'am. So I had probably about 4 years after I left the military where you have to understand that, like, you know, you go in as a child, right? And then you are kind of rewired. And I don't want to say that your identity is completely stripped of you. People say that all the time, and I don't think that's accurate. I think your identity has evolved, right? And you start operating your... Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, you froze for a while. So can you just repeat what you just said?
Sure.
About how you got over it.
Yes, ma'am. So work in progress, still figuring that out. For me, you have to understand that, like, when you enter the military, I don't want to say that they in the Marine Corps, the Marines I interview, they love to say, oh, the Marine Corps strips you of your identity. I think that's a bunch of hogwash. Okay. The Marine doesn't strip you of your identity. Okay. The Marines, they accelerate the process of adapting your identity to what the institution needs. Okay. And so there is a little bit of rewiring and indoctrination. It's necessary, and I support it wholly. That has to go with training someone to do the unthinkable. Right. So for me, I had 25 years rather, of structure, culture, falling into... Everyone in the military has a job. Every single individual, you actually have a single job that you as an individual are responsible for the entire thing. And so I had that structure. My day was organized, right? When you leave the military, you lose all that. You lose that structure. You lose that camaraderie. You lose that accountability to one another, right? And so when I got out, all that kind of went away, and I found it very difficult to enter into the private sector, having now a very different kind of set of a very different structure to fall in on. And so for me, a couple of things happened. One, did a very bad job of dealing with conflict in the office, something we all have to do, right? You have to deal with disagreements. I didn't do a good job of that. I felt a lot of veterans, when they leave the military service, they fall into, they gain weight. Okay. And I don't think that gaining weight is, from an aesthetic perspective, I don't really care about that. Okay. It's a health thing. And I fell out of my routine because I wasn't drinking alcohol. I was eating really badly because I think I needed another outlet. Right. And so I adopted this very unhealthy, stressed out all the time kind of lifestyle And then on top of that, I still hadn't dealt with all the experiences I had while I was in the military. So yes, I hadn't touched alcohol, but I had not yet figured out how to kind of process all that and then kind of package my life in a new way. When I started this process, joining the Beaten Zone, it put me in contact with a lot of other veterans who I discovered were going through the same thing. We all had our lives in the military, and now we were all civilians, and we were on the same journey. And I learned from a number of the guests that, like, hey, one of the things that I do is I have one thing I do every single morning, and that is I work out, right? And I kept hearing it over and over and over again. And I remember thinking to myself, well, maybe that's something, one of the good things I should take from the military life, and is get a routine where I wake up in the morning, and I'm not trying to go out and win Ironmans, but I try to go out and get some movement in, to get some fresh air. And that became an accomplishment, an achievement, that I had in the morning. Okay, cool. What can I do with this? Okay, well, maybe I can try to have a nutritious breakfast in the morning, add that to my routine, right? So now I have salmon in the morning instead of doing what I normally do, which is shove a bunch of junk in my mouth and stress eat all day long. And what I have determined is that, spiritual fitness, physical fitness, again, I don't care how I look. I'm not trying to be Idris Elba here. I'm just trying to be a healthy version of me. And what that's allowed me to do is to be more productive in the workplace, and it has allowed me to come home and be a better husband to my lovely wife.
Let me stop you there. You just said two things: spiritual fitness and healthy. What is the spiritual fitness you do?
So I have two things that I do. I pray. I pray because I was raised in the church. I am a Christian. I don't go to church much more anymore. But I have I do pray quite a bit. My wife is a social worker, and she has taught me this beautiful thing called mindfulness. And so I take structured time every single day to be mindful. And I've learned that that's a discipline where I actually sit down, I shut everything off, all my Slack notifications, all my Instagram notifications, all the notes, production notes for the podcast, and I just focus on me. And it's an evolving process, but it has been another one of those touchstones of my day where I can always count on the fact that I will have time to shut down, reflect on the day's events, reflect on life in general. And mindfulness and prayer have been, I would consider to be the two things. You probably have guessed there's a lot of negativity in the United States these days. Sadly, one of the things I've done is I've kind of shut off the news, which is not a healthy thing, by the way. I am very selective about my news sources. I'm very selective about the quality of information that I take in. And I'm working on that. I'm trying to become more resilient to differing opinions. I'm trying to become more empathetic because quite frankly, I feel that, the future of the United States is going to not be based upon any military might. It's going to be based upon the ability of people to have empathy and to listen and to understand. We will never build a community if we don't do this. And so you have all this stuff going on in my environment, and I just need to have points throughout the day where I can say, okay, what's happening? What can I do? I'm not a wealthy man. I'm not politically connected. I can't change what happens at the White House. I can't change what happens in the Army. But what I can do is I can do my part through my personal and individual interactions with people. So I'm not going to allow social media to ruin my day. No, those endorphins that I got from being called upon and being, and being relied upon and having value that I had in the military, I now try to channel that into my personal interactions. How can I try to be productive at the work and to listen to people and to have respect and to try to do the things that I can do as an individual. All the other stuff, be aware, but I've got to be disciplined. I can only focus on the things that I can do.
John, I love what you're saying. I love the fact, as you say, it's ongoing. I love the fact that you say the spiritual side, which we need to recognize and go back to, because we're not alone and we need that help. I love when you're saying about the news. I know you say it's not good. Actually, if what I'm hearing is that you've recognized not everything you hear in the news is the truth, and you've said a lot of crap, a lot of false news, which then goes in your head. And if you're told APQ, then you react to APQ. And when you realize that APQ is a lie, you don't need to hear APQ. And this, to me, is when wisdom is rising up and you realize exactly what is going wrong on around you, and you take actions to correct what is filtered through your brain, because your brain then tells you what to do. So the fact that you're not listening to the news and you're filtering what information you take in is actually wisdom, and it's something we all should be doing, because we're living in the age where I think we're all realizing that not everything out there we've been fed is the truth. And when you realize that, you're on a good road. So hey, I'm glad to hear that.
Let me give you an amen on that. The quality of information that we receive on a daily basis, ma'am, you're absolutely right. When I worked in the White House, I worked on the communication side, and I did a podcast episode because when the whole conflict with Iran broke out, between the United States and Iran broke out, I was very worried that a number of veterans in the community were feeling the same things as me. And so I have a pretty strict no politics rule on my podcast. I want people to feel that they can come in and talk about whatever they want, right? All sides of the spectrum. And but I got a little political that night.
Yes, I'm surprised.
I got a little political that night. And for me, it was a powerful moment, because I basically said, like, a lot of you guys are at home watching this going on, and I want to caution everyone that a lot of the stuff that you're going to be told is going to be highly filtered, highly edited. Some of it's going to be outright lies. The worst thing you can do is go into what I would consider to be a rabbit hole, right? To go into doom scrolling. You now are no longer in the fight. You now are a citizen and you're a member of the community. You have a little space now. You don't have to react to the very first thing you see. You could take a step back and ask yourself questions. And because, and I did that, and it was probably my highest performing episode, because a lot of people said, amen, man, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to I'm not going to believe the hype. Okay.
Yeah.
And, it was I was a little nervous about that, because that's not something I've always been kind of a fall in line kind of guy. And, the performative patriotism, we have a lot of it here in the United States. And it's like, oh, let's get behind the boys, let's get behind the boys. We're going to do. And I am very much still like that. But what does getting behind the boys really mean? Right. I personally think getting behind the boys, and I forgive me for the term boys, because men and women both serve in the military.
Yeah.
Getting behind the boys is actually asking and holding our leaders accountable for the terrible decisions that they make. Yeah. And actually becoming an advocate and saying, something, I understand that you did this because of X, Y, and Z. I always lead with that. Try to show some empathy. I understand. However, what you're saying and what you're doing, there's a disconnect here. And at the end of the day, within the comfy confines of Washington, D.C., where politics and defense policy live, there's a young man and a young woman out there who comes from middle America, who comes from the inner cities of our nation, mostly working class, who are going to be at the tip of the spear and are going to end up living life in the beaten zone. And life in Washington, D.C. will go on in 20 years, but that young man and woman is going to face a life-changing experience. And I'll be damned, forgive my language, if I'm going to not use my platform to remind people that we have a deep obligation to these men and women.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional now. You can see where. And
no, I understand you.
Yeah.
Because this is not just the military, this is life.
Right.
Right now, you're talking about the military and the false things that put on. But here in London, I don't watch the news neither, because I know it's all filtered and it's not true.
Right.
And you walk in the street and you hear people now react. Oh, this one's bad. That one. No, they're not bad. It's you're told there's bad because they want you to think they're bad, because they know what their agenda is underneath. And if you understood the agenda, you would realize when they say it's bad, think the opposite. It's good.
Oh,
You have to think the opposite. When they say this one's bad, that country's bad, nah, they're good. It's because the others are standing up to the bullying and
Right.
They're not taking the crap anymore. I'm getting a bit emotional. So let's stop there.
I love this.
What?
And that's it's really, at the end of the day, ma'am, it's critical thinking, right? It's critical thinking. And
we've been doing it for too long. And
Yeah.
we need to go back and see, because 20 years, 30 years when it's done, what happened? 10, 50, what happened? 5, what happened? What comes out at the end, you find it's a load of rubbish.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can honestly tell you that one of the things I swore to myself, not when I left the military, but now when this whole thing started up, I said, okay, listen, I know enough about human nature. People ask me, would you do it again? Absolutely. Because I felt it was my calling. And I do believe that nations need a military, and they need a strong military. I do believe that it is in human nature conflict. And so states have to have the ability to do that. I believe all that stuff. Okay. And I would absolutely do it again. But looking back, I would be a much bigger pain in the ass sitting in the back questioning. I failed. One of my biggest failures in the military is I never figured out how to say, excuse me, that's a really bad idea, sir. That was without doubt my biggest failure.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. And I was in a position on multiple occasions in the conduct of my duties where I actually said to myself, I can actually say something here. And maybe it's not about an emotional catharsis. It's a sense of duty to actually say, this is a really bad idea. And here's why, right? I always manage to say, this isn't the right time to do that. I haven't done all the political stuff on the background to get people behind me to kind of support me in this. You got to have allies, and that's certainly smart things to do. But I never figured out how to do that. Now that I'm a civilian, I can do that. And it is part of my own emotional health as well.
Now, let me stop you there, because if we go too deep, it's not good. But I like what you just said. It's part of your emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was what I'm listening and what I'm hearing. All these things were always there. And that was part of the stress you were holding on to. But now that you've come out of it and you're now on the civilian side and you're working through the things in your life, you can see where, yeah, I knew that was wrong, but I didn't say anything. And the reactions that it caused, or the consequences that those decisions caused, you could see them and it was painful. But now that you're out of it, it is part of your life where you've turned it around and you're able to stand up and speak that truth. And that, I think, has taken some of the steam out of the pot, which has helped you to be calmer. Am I
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
I think that's well said. That's well said. You've got me. I love this conversation because you've got me thinking about all kinds of interesting things. One of the things I've learned in this process is that, and I'm not criticizing the clinical approaches to mental health. I am not. Okay, I believe those are essential. But I have discovered that a lot of veterans I've spoken with have talked to me about what, I don't want to say the word controversial. Maybe in the United States they're controversial, in some parts of the U.S. at least, but unconventional approaches to help to care. I'm talking about the psychedelics, for example, medicinal marijuana, different types of therapies, right? And again, like, where does the objection to that sort of stuff come from? Does it, because I'm not a doctor, but I've done some open source research, and there appears to be some medical proof that psychedelics, for example, can be a great help for someone who is suffering from PTS, right? And for me, it's like one of the things I'm kind of that's interesting me now is like, what are these different approaches? What are these these holistic kind of approaches that veterans don't like to be examined, if that makes sense? Like,
Yes.
clinical language, and maybe it's a man thing, I don't know, but clinical language sometimes can be quite intimidating, and people don't like to feel like they're being examined. And so, like, our approach to providing care for the men and women who have served and now are living in the civilian world, I think is something that needs a lot of attention. And I think some of that's cultural too. All
right, let me stop you there because our time, we could go talking about this. It's a lot. Now, you've gone through, you've come out, you're now in the technical world. And as you said, it is still a work in progress. And yes, and I think as human beings, we are, when we look at life today and we see certain things, we are constantly changing, and we need to change. We need to be more aware. And through that process, we're going on. John, what are you doing at the present time, using what you've known? Now, I know you've got the podcast, and could you just mention what your podcast name is again, and how can people connect with you, or do you do one-to-ones? Tell us a bit before I have to say goodbye.
Yes, ma'am. The name of the podcast is The Beaten Zone, and I am on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And so we conduct long-form, one-on-one interviews, and I don't even like to call them interviews. It's much like what we do here, conversations with men and women who served in combat and now talk about. We don't focus on the war stories. We focus on the emotions of the war stories, and then how in their current lives they kind of carry those experiences forward and deal with them. It's long form. YouTube tells me I should make it sharp, punchy, and entertaining. I don't care about what YouTube wants. We don't care about vanity metrics. We care about the quality of the conversation. And if we don't get 1 million people, and I don't have my own podcast, the John Mark Wilson Show, I don't really care. Okay. This is about building a community. And I believe that storytelling has a therapeutic angle. I don't have science behind that. You might know more about that than me for sure. But it's my thesis right now is that there's a therapy to storytelling, and then we help one another. And I text with these guys and gals. It's amazing. We text back and forth. These are people I didn't know, before we had the podcast. And
they need that outlet to talk. They need that outlet where people will listen and not look down to them as being strange. Now, and it's very interesting, before I have to say goodbye, John, leave us with some kind of gold nugget or two to the viewers and other people's listening, that it could help them along their journey?
Well, I don't pretend myself, I don't believe I have a source of wisdom, but it's just things I learned.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to the point I made earlier. And I have to give credit to the great Henry Rollins, who wrote this article years ago called The Iron and the Soul. And he mentioned in this article that he was talking about his experience of lifting weights in the gym and what lifting weights taught him. And he said that the best gift that the iron can give you is not actually being lifted, it's actually falling to the ground. Mm-hmm. Because it's feedback. And it's a great lesson about strength. Weakness is not, and this is the thing, weakness is a good thing. Weakness is a call, is a call to action. And it can be a very powerful thing. It is not a vulnerability. It is not something that should define who you are. It can actually mobilize you and empower you. Yeah. Weakness is something that you should absolutely embrace as something. And connection with other people is the second thing. Just text people. Simple conversations. You're going to learn so much. And you'll learn to sift through all the BS out there and sift through all the negativity and really enjoy living, which is meeting different people, living as part of a community. It's just, don't overthink it, man. Don't let the social media and all the BS that comes out of the news turn you into a zombie. Just get to know people, and as Jesus says, there's only one commandment, and that is to love one another. Yeah. And I believe that to be the truth.
Well said, because love is the only way. So, John, I have to say goodbye. Oh, I'll probably have to speak to you again, go further. But to all those who are listening, thank you to John Mark Wilson in Washington. You'll see this program is about people holding things in. It's the men, it's the women, it's military, and how they can get some kind of help. John has his podcast. Thank you all for listening, and bye for now. Bye, everyone.